Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you, Alex. Let's call the Public Works and Utilities Committee meeting for January 9th, 2023. To order. Could we have a roll call vote or a roll call, please, Ms. Diaz?
Councillor Chavez. Councillor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Councillor Mike Garcia.
Present.
Councillor Romero Worth
I'm here.
and Chairman Rivera.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff, Ms. Miller?
No changes from staff, Mr. Chair.
Anything from the committee? Wishes of the committee?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve the agenda with a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries. Next, approval of the consent agenda. Any changes from staff?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Anything that's been requested be pulled, Ms. Diaz?
Yes, item D was pulled by Councillor Romero Worth and item F by Councillor Lee Garcia.
F is in Frank.
That is correct.
Anything else from the committee? What are the wishes of the committee?
Approve as amended.
Second.
Motion for approval is amended with a second. Any further discussion? You know, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? See no, motion carries. Before we get on to presentation items, I did have something that I was going to bring up from the committee, but I know everybody's gone at that point. So I wanted to take this moment to give muchísimas gracias from the city of Santa Fe and Mayor Alan Weber to Mr. Shannon Jones, the Public Utilities Director. This is thank you for 24 years of service to the city of Santa Fe Public Utilities Department. Your visionary leadership and day-to-day guidance ensured reliable water and wastewater systems, making the city clean, green, and beautiful. You are leaving an example of service and accomplishment for years to come. We will miss you and wish you the best on the next chapter of your life's adventure. So, being Public Works and Utilities Director or chair of this committee for many years, you've been a godsend. So, to find somebody that's so knowledgeable about water, wastewater, it's going to be tough to fill your shoes. So I appreciate you. I wish you luck in your future endeavors. I hope you take some time in retirement to enjoy life a little bit. Take some time to take your wife on a nice vacation, relax a little bit. I think it's worth it. But I just want to wish you the best of luck and want you to know that I'm going to miss you. And that I appreciate you. Honestly. Anybody else? Councilwoman Romero Worth.
I'll let us.
Anything you want to say, Shannon?
Can I just add really quick, Mr. Chair?
Sure. Councilor Romero Worth.
I just want to add my thanks, Shannon, for your years of service, for your depth of knowledge, which is deep and going to be sorely missed. And also for our collaborations and your responsiveness and willing to work to move the city forward. And I just want you to know that I agree. You are a tremendous example for the city. We're sorry to lose you and you will be missed. But I wish you all the best in your next chapter and enjoy it. Thank you.
Counselor. Anyone else? Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think, as Councilor Rivera said, take some time off. It's one of those things. I see so many folks put in dedicated time and effort, and then they jump immediately into a next gig. I think, what I would stress is spend some time with your family, loved ones, friends, pets, take a hike. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't know what the next adventure may be, but given the dedication you have given to the city, I know whatever next step is, you're just going to jump right into it and give that much dedication. And I think you need to reward yourself with some time off. So football playoffs are coming on. I don't know if your team made the playoffs, but hopefully they did, and you get to enjoy some time. And just thank you for everything that you brought to the city. The experience that you had and to help lead the department was tremendous. And I think it's kind of rhetorical in the sense we always say you're leaving big shoes to fill, but with somebody like your expertise, especially since the major transitions that you helped lead, hopefully folks got your number and we'll get you on quick speed dial, because I know a lot of that institutional knowledge will be walking out the door with you. So thank you for everything to keep our services running and keep our community safe. Thank you.
Anybody else? Counselor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, congratulations. When you're at the helm directing people and being responsible, it's not always easy. And just like Councilor Garcia said, and the rest of my colleagues, congratulations and best wishes to you and your family. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. So we're on to item 5A. Can you read that, please, Ms. Diaz?
Update on the Water Division's Asset Management Plan and Implementation. This is presented by John Delmar and Taylor Jurgens.
Delmar, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for your time tonight. We're going to give just a very brief update on our Water Division Asset Management Plan. And all I'm going to do is introduce myself again. I'm John Delmar, and I'm the engineer supervisor of the engineering section. And then it's my pleasure to introduce Taylor Jurgens, who's an engineer that we recently hired and who will present. Thank you.
Evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's nice to meet you all. I'm Taylor Jurgens, as John said, and I'm here to give you an overview of our asset management plan update and implementation.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
What was that?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I actually moved here from Kansas City, Missouri back in September. I'd lived there for about 5 years, working in water and wastewater for a consulting engineer there. And I'm originally from Nebraska, where I was born and raised. So far, my first 3 to 4 months here have been great. Really loving the town. Yeah, loving all the activities here.
Well, welcome to Santa Fe, and thank you for coming on board.
So first, for those who maybe aren't familiar with the idea of asset management or kind of what it is, I'll just quickly define it. But basically, it's kind of a methodology and tool set to help us decide how and where to allocate our resources in order to best meet our operational goals for the lowest life cycle cost throughout our system. And so it's kind of a more strategic way to just operate, maintain, and renew our system. And so why the need for an asset management plan? First of all, it helps us to do more with our limited resources, which not only include money, but also time on the schedule. It also helps us to more effectively operate, maintain, and plan for improvements and maintenance throughout our system. The operation and maintenance takes on a much more proactive and predictive approach, which is a lot more cost effective than the reactive alternative that is pretty common in municipalities that maybe don't have an asset management plan in place. Also, the data and tools that it gives staff members really helps us to kind of plan out and predict our placements, our maintenance needs out into the future so we can have a more accurate kind of projection there. And it's also quickly becoming the industry standard for medium and large size municipalities all across the US. That's primarily driven by the cost savings that have been realized by several utilities who have implemented this, and additionally, because people need to start doing more with less because maybe they don't have the staff or the money resources to go as far as they used to. And also there's an increased emphasis and requirement being placed on a lot of the federal and state funding throughout the country that municipalities start to have more of an asset management approach. So that kind of leads to the next bullet, which is the New Mexico Water Trust Board and SRF funding requirements. And SRF stands for the State Revolving Fund, which is kind of a loan and grant mechanism throughout the state. But they fairly recently implemented a requirement that municipalities work towards implementing an asset management plan throughout their system in order to be eligible for funding requirements. And one of those additional requirements includes presenting an update to the governing body or the appropriate committees on the status of your asset management plan for that year. And that's what kind of led to the City of Santa Fe Resolution 2015-35, which commits the city to implementing that asset management plan based on those guidelines. So here's kind of an overview of the asset management practices that we're currently using today. First and foremost is the 2020 asset management plan that was done by FCS and Brown and Caldwell. This was a division-wide assessment of all our assets in the system. And I'll just note that that does not include anything with BDB. They have their own separate asset management plan. But basically that plan really touched on the 5 components of asset management, which are establishing an asset inventory, kind of defining your levels of service throughout the system, doing like a risk and criticality assessment of all your assets in your system, and then looking at life cycle costs and long-term funding evaluations for the improvements that might be necessary. So that's something that we've referenced pretty frequently and we continue to build on. Another component is our priority line replacement program, which is essentially every year we go out and replace certain mains throughout the system, generally selected based on those that have a history of water main breaks or are notably old, vulnerable, things like that. Also, our source of supply uses what's called a computerized maintenance management software that they use to kind of manage and oversee their operation, maintenance, and replacement of assets specific to the Canyon Road treatment plant, the wells, and the pump stations. And then finally, we do perform regular asset inventory updates in our ongoing GIS software. And just kind of a few highlights from our asset inventory. We have over 600 miles of water mains currently active in our system, over 3,000 fire hydrants, 8,400 valves, 9 finished water storage tanks totaling almost 35 million gallons of storage, our 2 reservoirs, 7 city wells and 13 Buckman wells, and then the 2 water treatment plants, Canyon Road and partial BDB. And so then this table, this was from the 2020 asset management plan. And it kind of shows the total current replacement value for all our assets in our system. And you can kind of see at the bottom there, that adds up to $800 million in assets currently in our system. And I'll just point out that that was done in 2020. So with the recent inflation, that's likely a fair bit higher than that even. And also as part of that 2020 plan, they created a schedule of renewal and replacement over the next 30 years, projecting out to 2050. And this is a graphical representation of that. Basically, you can see that it comes out to about $13.5 million in rehab and replacement throughout our system annually. And I'll just point out that that big spike in 2041, that is a result of, I think, 3 to 4 storage tanks coming due for replacement at the same time, just generally based on their original construction date. That's something that we would see ahead of time and kind of plan around so that we don't get, those don't all come due in the same year. We would spread that out over a number of years. And then finally, here's some updates and next steps that we're currently targeting for this calendar year. First of all, I have been assigned as the asset management program coordinator with the goal of leading the effort to a more integrated asset management plan. We've also been collaborating recently with the Public Works Division, trying to gain insights and lessons learned from them because they've been using an asset management software for a number of years now, which is what we're trying to work towards. So we're just trying to get some insights from them on best practices. And then we're also currently working on finalizing a scope with an on-call consultant to assist in software evaluation and selection with the goal of having a selection made in the first half of calendar year 23. And then the idea would be that the second half of 2023 is dedicated to implementing that software throughout the water division. And with that, that is all I've got. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
How do you say your last name? Jurgens? Jurgens. Any questions for Mr. Jurgens? Councilor Romero Worth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so let's go back. Tell me again, the resolution from 2015 said what?
That was essentially a commitment to implement an asset management plan, I believe within 4 years, based on the requirements that were put out by the Water Trust Board, that basically requires municipalities to work towards implementing an asset management plan.
Okay, so all it did was sort of direct that you actually do the asset management plan.
Yep.
And in 2020, you hired, I don't know who FCS is.
They are a consulting engineer.
So is it 3 consulting engineers or it's FCS and Brown and Caldwell?
It would be Brown and Caldwell is one.
Okay.
CS would be another. And I am not sure if any others were involved on a limited basis through that process, but.
Okay, so there were two engineering firms that did the asset management plan. Do you have any idea how much it cost?
I do not have that data. John, you know.
Jones?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Worth, just for clarification, FCS is not an engineering firm. It's our financial consultant, Jason Mum and his team. So they also played a role in that. So it wasn't just engineer number of assets, but also integrating our financial status planning into that. So the FCS group is Jason Mum's team.
Okay, and when, prior to the 2020 asset management plan, when had the last one been done? Did we have one, or is this the first one we've ever done?
This is the first formalized asset management plan documentation.
Okay, and the state law requiring you to make a presentation to your governing body just went into effect? That's new as of,
I believe that went into effect around that 2015 timeline.
Okay, so sort of, all right. And the software is just going to tell me a little bit more about what the software does.
Yeah, so the software, it pulls in data from our current GIS system. And it gives you the ability to track and assign a lot of data to individual assets. And so right now, like our T&D department, they utilize work orders, and a lot of that is either through spreadsheets or physical copies. What a software would allow you to do is generate work orders through this software. You can go in there, look at that specific asset, see what work orders have been done in the last however many years. It kind of gives you an inspection history. You can assign, risk scores, likelihood of failure scores to it. So it gives you a lot more granularity and data assigned to physical assets. And then you can kind of take that, and a lot of them have projection tools that you can use to prioritize certain mains or pumps, things like that, or a replacement schedule out however many years you want to look.
And does any of it, do you have to go in for the analytics, or will it prompt you? Will it say, hey, this particular main has had this kind of a history, based on some sort of algorithm, red flag, might want to look at this in the next X years?
Yeah, so to get that data in there initially, it requires manual input. So someone would go in and say, if there's a break on a particular main, they would log that break to that main in the software system. But then once that's all populated, it has tools that will kind of lift that to the top of the list if it's got what we would call a high likelihood of failure based on those breaks.
So when you say we're going to have this software, how long will it take before it's populated? Are we just installing the software in the next, when did you say?
So the goal is by June of this year, we would have a software selected. And then it would be a several month process to kind of get the workflows established in there and start to populate that data. It wouldn't be an instantaneous thing. So it would kind of be ongoing. And as we would do normal maintenance, we would start to build that data set every time we have contact with a specific asset in the system.
Okay, so we haven't picked a software yet.
Correct.
And we haven't purchased one, obviously, if we haven't picked one.
Correct. Yep. That's the goal of the first 6 months of this year we're going to bring in a number of different softwares that are out there and do demos of them, look at their capabilities, and then ultimately make a selection that we feel is best for us.
Gotcha. And Mr. Jones, how often do you recommend, or is it best practices, that an asset management plan be updated? Like, so this is our first one in this area. Is it, I don't know, how often do you have to, and maybe the software helps with that. I don't know, keep it fresh.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Worth, really understanding that the asset management plan has many components. I think to answer your question, depending on the component, how frequently that's to be updated. But definitely the plan will have to integrate with other systems, meaning the system will have to be told that a new water line was accepted through a development. As Mr. Jorgens alluded to, there's also work that occurs. And again, I'm just making examples, right? A bus runs over a fire hydrant. And so the crews are repairing a fire hydrant. They put a new fire hydrant. The system needs to be told that because it's still tracking the original installation date of that hydrant. So there has to be this integration. And so currently things like our source of supply uses a computerized maintenance management system that tracks their work. Very similar, transmission and distribution may use a CityWorks software or a maintenance connection. So while we're doing the computerized maintenance management system, the asset management system will either bridge those softwares so the data comes into a centralized location. But more likely than not, the software that's selected will have that functionality and will transition our computerized maintenance management system to that software. And again, just being direct that, so currently Source Supply is on Antero. Chances are the asset management system may replace Antero and will integrate all of that work and data into the new asset management. So it's within the box and not having to speak across another software. That'll be determined through the evaluations, but my expectation is when they get the asset management software, a lot of the other softwares we have will probably go away. And we'll put them all into one box so that the data being entered into the current systems will now be entered into the asset management software. And that'll be updated. That's updated daily, right? Work that's being done. When was oil changed? When was something replaced? When did something fail? When was the last time it failed? All of that data to make decisions will be living within the one software. It's my expectation.
And how are our internal processes for actually updating, say, when there's a new fire hydrant because one got run over? I mean, is there a manual? Does that, we got people who come and go from the city. Do they know that when they make a change that affects the assets, it needs to be recorded?
Councilmember, so they do. So right now it's not talking to the asset management, but again, there's a lot of smaller places where that information comes in. So chances are if a fire hydrant hit, maybe the call came into our customer service center. They take the call, well, they log that call in their system and it generates a work order, right? That goes to the staff to go repair it. When they complete the work order, it gets closed out in that system. So again, the challenge that our engineer section will have to go through is, again, are we interfacing with our maybe advanced utility billing system? And what does that interface look like? So I would expect the asset management system would not change the advanced billing system. So there would be an interface of how it gets that information. What water was turned on, where were there leaks, things that we do now. It could be an import of it, or it could be real time. That's going to be their challenge to work through. If a crew member gets called out in the middle of the night through an after hours call, they create the work order. And then the next morning that's given to a supervisor who processes that work order and completes it. That probably will live within the asset management system.
What happens when it's one of our contractors who goes out?
That does the work or
Yeah, that does the work, but it's still coming in first and then we're notifying, we don't have crews maybe available, so we notify the contractor.
Right, that's a great question. So when a third party contractor is dispatched to do a repair like a main break, that is done through our engineering section. It's their project manager. So he would create the work order, right, or the task order that would encapsulate what it is they did. And then how do they integrate that in? But that's also in their department, within their section. But that is information that you would want to capture in this. And that'd be done through the project manager that oversees that contract.
And to get it to this utopia of one box, how long are we talking?
Again, depending on the software that's selected, but I would probably give 9 to 12 months of data integration. They'll go through, they do have an asset inventory, which is a great component, but I do feel that there'll be these exercises that look at each asset as you integrate in. That means, do you change the oil every 3,000 miles? Do you change the oil every 3 months? And what is the risk that's assigned? Like, so all of that will have to be re-looked at, and that goes into the implementation of building out those functionalities of it. So really right now it still depends on the software they pick. But my gut feeling is I'd probably say 9 to 12 months of data integration before that system's up and running and you put the other ones to rest.
I didn't expect you to say so few months. I thought for sure you'd tell me years.
If you were starting from scratch, I could really see that being a daunting challenge. You kind of alluded to smaller systems, but keep in mind right now, Source of Supply, which has many of these assets, those assets are built out in their current computerized maintenance management system. So being able to export that data, just do a scrubbing to make sure it still aligns with our values, and then uploading that is the value that we have. GIS is a powerful tool, right? So a lot of those assets are in there with with the data. When was it installed? What size is it? And so they're not having to recreate that. They're pulling in data pools, scrubbing the data to make sure it's accurate, and then uploading it into the new system.
So, and I guess, we've, at least in District 2, there have been, it's some of the oldest parts of the city. So the infrastructure is old. We've had a lot of main breaks. I understand it's not necessarily out of line with what we would expect in any given year. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. So a system like this would help us, I guess, understand better, right? When these, will it proactively help us alleviate some of these main breaks? I don't think you can ever completely predict when a main is going to break, but I don't know, what does it do for predictability and kind of the level of main breaks that we see? And does it help at all with that?
So it does. So again, stepping back to looking at how do we currently manage that particular issue, right? That O&M issue that we have. So currently we have a structure that we've named the priority pipeline replacement. And so there's a matrix that helps drive those decisions. And so we've presented on that matrix before, but there's multiple factors on each weight a little different. One being, what is the age of the pipe? What is the type? What is the location? How critical is it? Is there fire protection? All of these factors, right, that we would question about a main is being done through a matrix. A matrix meaning it's probably an Excel spreadsheet that we push a main into, maybe from our model, and it identifies it as a project, and then how does it fit on the priority? I feel the asset management plan takes us to the next level and data gathering and decision making. So it would replace that matrix, but it would do the same thing, only better and faster. You're right. So then when points of failure, whether it's a leak or a type of pipes discovered, as information we become more aware of it, staff will have to integrate that into the asset management software. But at that point, it's doing those calculations to say, based on the information you've given, what is the most likely point of failure? And if it fails, at what level of criticality? How does it impact service? And what other factors are we not thinking, right? It could be the intersection that main resides in, right? There are intersections that pose more challenges. These are all the factors that ideally would be built into the software, where it's processing all these data points, putting out a report to say this should be your number one priority, or these are your top 10, and then staff being able to quality assure that data, but saying, yeah, these do make sense. These are what we expected to rise up. You build confidence in that software, then you build confidence in the output of it and how that rolls into your capital improvement plan or your priority pipeline replacement program.
So we are taking the step into modernizing with this new software. I assume other cities do this, or is this kind of new to cities? Or are we catching up?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's new to cities. I think we're constantly evolving on how we can do it better. Again, computerized maintenance management systems in the beginning was just operators that knew where things were and which ones they should replace. Rolling that into a system to say, well, how often do you exercise valves was kind of where we alluded. Knowing that there's more components from what's in inventory, what parts do you have on the shelf, what's the lead time, how do you integrate inventory into the computerized maintenance management system, you begin to build more and more robust software. So I think where we're at is we have multiple softwares that are doing certain things. The asset management plan would look to bring those together into a common software or interface with the ones that won't get replaced, and then dive us even deeper into asking what are the better questions should we be asking than we're not today, and how do we continue to do that? So I think it's an evolution, not that we weren't doing it and now we are doing it. It's just how do we do it better tomorrow than we were doing it today?
Gotcha. Sure, you don't want to stay? Help us out.
These guys are good.
I'm sure they are. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Any other questions, Councilor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the presentation, and I think that some of the points that I needed clarification on were asked by Counselor Romero Worth. But I think some of the questions I would have, and it's pretty visionary to do this because I see how technology can definitely make a better situation for us, identify problem areas. It's difficult to change or to go into something new, which sometimes you don't know. We want to take, for example, our overall city management system, and there was issues with that. I would make a recommendation that, again, when you're looking for these softwares, get the right one. Do it right away, the first time. And that leads me to what type of programming it would be needed once this is put into place. Are we looking at more staff? You're looking at, I mean, obviously there's a lot of data input. I think some of the questions by Councilor Romero Worth were to how does it work? And you can't just set it and forget it. You have to have people monitoring it, inputting data, making decisions based upon this information that they're getting back. So how is that going to work?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, basically it's not going to be something that we need to bring all this new staff in to kind of get the ball rolling and keep it rolling. It may require some minor tweaks here and there. For example, T&D may have a specific workflow they follow when they go out and repair a main break or a leak or something like that. There's things that we could have them also do and record while they're out there that would come back in and report back to like our asset management software. And so there's tweaks we can make to current workflows that would help support this asset management software and help support the transition to it. And there's areas where we might recognize that a current workflow isn't the most efficient right now. So this may help us change that. So we're working a little more efficiently in certain ways. All throughout this process, and I know throughout the 2020 asset management plan, folks at T&D, folks at Source and Supply, they were all engaged throughout the process, and they were interviewed, and their feedback was recorded on, you know, what they felt was important components of the software that we ultimately select. So that their voice has been involved throughout this process, and that'll continue to be the case.
Thank you. How long would you plan on continuing your old system while this new system would be implemented?
I would guess that it would follow a similar timeline to what Shannon had said. We're not going to abandon any of the existing softwares that are in place until we feel comfortable that the new asset management software is, you know, fully built out and up to speed and capable of taking on whatever that old software was. So we wouldn't just abandon those right away. We would make sure we've got this in place and workflows set up and all of that so that we're not losing any sort of inherent data as part of that transition.
Any other questions, Councilor Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jurgens and Mr. Delmar for the presentation. I do have a couple additional questions regarding the plan, the infrastructure upgrades. And so beginning with the total asset value, just so I make sure I'm understanding this chart correctly. To replace everything on this chart, it's going to cost us $800 million. Right. Okay. And then, so with that being said, there's a plan in place for these upgrades to take place over a 50-year cycle?
That is just what they outlined in this table here. That's not necessarily exactly what will be implemented. But that just gives a frame of reference for, the funding that would be needed to turn over your entire asset system in a 50-year recurring cycle.
Okay. And then I guess my follow-up to that is the next chart down, the long-term funding requirements. It's a 20-year plan, this one. Doesn't give the estimated cost for this 20 years. And I appreciate that the water tanks are going to be addressed over a couple of years, because I think that was a concern I had in the past. Trying to hit that all at once, it could be challenging potentially for us. My questions revolve more around water main upgrades, because as we begin to get into 2025, you start touching that $10 million a year. And I guess first question is, historically, Mr. Jones, and maybe you might be the best question to answer this. What on average do we spend? Because once we start hitting $10 million a year, it's going to be that much or more consistently for the remainder of 15 years. And so I guess historically, what have we spent for upkeep and replacement?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, I would say probably average about $4 million a year in water line replacements. Water line replacements now.
Okay, so $4 million a year, because I mean, if we even look at 2022, which we just had, it doesn't look like $4 million is represented on this chart. It's a little teeny tiny sliver. And I can't tell by the color. Looks like a dark gray was our most expensive thing, which would be maybe storage tanks. So is it the chart that's not reflecting the $4 million, or is that $4 million unexpected that's coming into play?
Councilor Garcia, the 4 million was a number I assigned. If I look back over the average of how much we've spent on priority pipeline replacements. So getting this is taking that bigger approach and say, well, what is our inventory? And if we wanted to replace it all within 50 years, how much would you have to do? So again, it's that evolution moving forward. I would say historically, we've invested about $4 million a year in identifying projects and getting them put in the ground.
Okay. So with that being said, I would say let's update this chart, just because it's not representative of that. By looking like that, looking at this, we should be able to know from 2021 and 22 where we spent resources. And looking at this chart, I would know that information. As Councilor Romero Worth noted, we've had a lot of breaks in District 2. And it's speaking with some of the contractors there, it seemed like it was due to infrastructure aging. And you spoke earlier regarding a matrices around priorities for lines that need to be replaced. It'd be interesting to know or find out where these lines are that are kind of in the priority pipeline, so to speak, no pun intended. Because I think that's one thing I've heard from folks over these past couple months, is that the pipes are breaking and they just continue to break. For example, the one that happened on Cabra was, they popped it and then they thought they fixed it and then it popped again. And then the valve to turn back on pipes was broken. So, I mean, it's an aging infrastructure. It was one of those things, the worst scenarios that could happen happened. And as our infrastructure ages, that's not going to be a more unique experience. It's going to become a more commonplace experience. And be interesting to know based off the matrices, the priorities, and how it's reflected in this chart here, because you do see the ebbs and flows with the sharp incline hitting about 2036 and then it declines again, but that's again, only going 20 years. We don't know beyond that because there's a 50-year plan and only being presented as 20. So it could be up and down and up and down, or is it going to gradually decline for mains? I think another thing, and the reason why I'm focusing on mains is because of the way it disrupts life. Without water, it really causes a challenge for residents. Without water, it causes the challenges for businesses to operate. And I'd hate for us to be in a situation where our mains are so outdated that within a couple of years, everything just goes kaput. And I don't know if that's the case, just because I'd like to see the information regarding types of pipes utilized different parts of town, because I mean, for example, there's piping in my section of town that is the old, maybe you've got the proper terminology. It's not clay pipes, it's the old paper pipes where they're just crushing, they're falling, and it's not anything else, but the material utilized is disintegrating, so to speak. So it'd be interesting. I don't know if that's possible for future to get maybe, and I'm happy to do one-on-one just regarding our infrastructure. What types of pipes are around what part of town? Why are we designating such areas as a priority? And based off of those priorities, how is it reflected in this chart here over the next 20 years? Again, because I'd hate for us to be in that situation where residents are out of water for days, businesses are out of water for days, and it impacts life. And I think residents hold up their end of the bargain by paying their bills and taxes, etc. So the expectation that the service needs to be provided. And so I think we need to hold up our end of the bargain to ensure that the infrastructure is in place to provide that service. So I think it's a broader topic for future discussion, just kind of interesting to me in how we're planning this all out over the next 20 years and 50 years. It'd be interesting to see what the remainder of these 30 years looks like on such a chart. But thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate all this information.
Counselor. Mr. Jurgens, thank you for the presentation, and again, welcome to the city of Santa Fe. The Water Trust Board typically sets priorities. Are we in a position to take advantage of those priorities in the upcoming legislative session?
Mr. Chair, I know we have some projects, I believe, on the list that are eligible or in consideration for funding. John, you may be able to answer that one a little better than me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We currently have, I believe, 1.5 million pending from the Water Trust Board for our mostly larger CIP projects, less specifically tied to our asset, what you would consider part of our asset management plan. But we also have funding requests, significant additional funding requests, specifically for our 2 reservoirs, upgrades to the dams. We've got the Canyon Road Water Treatment Plant upgrades scheduled to start later this year, as well as upgrades to one of the dams, and then the second dam probably within the next 5 years. And all of those are on the order of $20 million type CIP projects that we're seeking Water Trust Board funding, as well as other federal funding through infrastructure bills and whatever mechanisms we can find for funding. Sometimes it's Army Corps of Engineer, EPA, there's different sources. probably all of them would want to see that we have an asset management plan that's being continually updated and fairly, mature and being built upon as one of the conditions. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were well situated to take advantage of everything out there. So sounds like you have a good handle on that. Mr. Jurgens, you mentioned that we have 7 city wells. Are those all active or are we? I know there's probably a few that aren't, but can you give an update on those?
Yeah, I think there are a couple, from what I understand, that aren't active, and those might be above and beyond that 7. I don't know, maybe Shannon or John, you can answer that with more confidence, but.
Mr. Chair, to be honest, I would say that all the city wells are active and could be put into use. They may not run on every day case. The only one that I would say is probably still being worked through is the Baca well.
Yeah, and at some point, maybe we can get an update on the Baca well. I know, Shannon, you're not gonna be here, but you can pass that on. Just an update on where we are in the Baca well. There was some discussion about main breaks, and I think we've had them every year, but we do have a plan, right, to deal with aging infrastructure.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. And I do know, again, like pipes underground they do break. That's in every system. When we compare ourselves across the industry, we think that we're doing really well as far as how many breaks per 100 miles of pipe, which is how like an American Water Works Association would necessarily score you. So I would say that we're probably, about 25 to 30% of what the expected breaks would be. But again, I'm also sensitive to know about the impact of what one will have and how quick it can be repaired. So again, currently we do have the information in our system. So it's easy to determine out of the 600 miles of pipe, how many miles are cast iron pipe? How many miles were installed between 1970 and 1980? So those dynamics are there. And again, we also track where are the main breaks, what are the things that we're seeing in the system, and how do we allude into that? All of those things we've evolved through our matrix to say each line that comes up to be replaced, how does it weigh against the other ones? Meaning if you have to do one of 2 lines, which one should you do first? Again, the evolution that these guys are taking us through on actual data-based decision-making is what the asset management plan and software we're looking to take us to that next level. But you're absolutely right. Every day we're looking at what is the aging infrastructure, what is the replacement schedule, what are we doing first? And now we're just wanting to continue to evolve to say, well, how do we continue to use data to make those decisions?
Thanks. And how are we comparing this year to last year? I think last year it seems like we had more main breaks than we've had this year, even though we've had a number this year. But do you have comparison numbers?
Mr. Chair, so being in 2023, right, as our calendar year, this is gonna be a good year for us. I would say on average, you would expect I think we track about 36 main breaks a year. I think for 2022, I would say we were probably somewhere between 36 and 38. So I don't see that it was outside what we would consider typical. Also keep in mind that, again, depending on where the break is, what's the size of the pipe, what location, right? There are other challenges that roll into that. But I would think even through 2022, while we did have more severe main breaks at the end, we were probably ahead of the schedule until kind of moving into November, December. Weather changes definitely shift those pipes. And I would say that we made up ground in those statistics through December. But I would say we finished at or just slightly above what our average would be.
Councilor Michael Garcia, you had a follow-up?
I think you touched on it. It was just, my question was regarding funding plan, because we've got the asset plan. And when we're talking about, replacement costs of $800 million over 50 years, I think the other question is, where's the funding going to come from? I don't know if there's a plan in place to say, and I know we can't project out 80 years, but for the next 10 years, this is where X amount, I mean, if we're going off this average, $135 million is we're expecting to come from. I don't know if there's such a plan for that.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, there is a plan for that, really trying to pin down what does that spend rate looks like? But ultimately, I would say probably three approaches. So one would be rate-based, right? Carving out a portion of revenues that come in for replacement projects. Seeking state and federal funding. So they alluded to applications with the Water Trust Board, Water Resource Development Act at the federal level. These are things that we actively pursue and request funding for. And then also keeping in mind that the utility has bonding capacity where we manage our debt service. And right now we do have a good bond rating, right? The AA+ bond rating, and have some capacity there. And our 5-year financial plan done by FCS looks at those and makes anticipation of even bond sales at strategic points, which would boost the cash balance to execute mainly capital improvements, things we're talking about. So I think those three would be just kind of high level funding strategies for this type of work.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Jones, the AA bond rating, AA+ bond rating, that's for the city as a whole. Does the water division have its own bond rating?
The water division and the wastewater division both get bond rated separately. Both of them also came in at AA+.
Okay.
Individually, they get rated.
So we're sitting in good position.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Mr. Chair, just for the public to know, that AA rating for utilities was just reaffirmed like in the last, I want to say, week. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jurgens. You got through your first presentation of a city
Thank you.
committee.
It was
So
a
thank
pleasure
you.
meeting you all.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Let's go on to the consent agenda, and the first item is item D. Read that into the record, please, Ms. Diaz.
A resolution adopting a strategy for donating or selling at below market value a property identified as Las Estrellas, Tract 6A, to a developer certified as a qualifying guarantee under the New Mexico Affordable Housing Act to develop Santa Fe Homes program homes, low-price dwelling units or units price restricted through another affordable housing subsidy, and approving an announcement to sell the remaining 7 Las Estrellas lots with a local preference. This is Terry Lease.
Thank you. Councilor Romero Worth, you pull this item?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Lees, do you have a presentation that you can walk us through?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, you're asking for a presentation?
Well, I'm asking, this is the first I've seen this. I've looked at the packet. It'd be great if you could walk us through what you're doing, how it works. I don't know if you have, doesn't look like maybe you have the
Mr. Chair,
maps that are in our packet, but was hoping to see them on a bigger screen than my little computer.
okay. Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, sure. I don't have anything prepared, but I'd be happy to walk through. So as many of you already know that Las Estrellas Properties began 50 years ago. And there was a partnership with developers to develop that land. Through the years that partnership, I guess, was strained. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, there was a settlement agreement dissolving that development agreement with the developer. And in that agreement, the city received some water rights, and this land that's the subject of this resolution. I believe it was last year, the resolution was brought forward for the same thing, to sell And I believe the last resolution actually was to sell all of the properties at that time. And it was not approved by the governing body. And so now we've kind of reworked this. Councilor Garcia and Villarreal were really the primary drivers here of the terms in this resolution. But to summarize, there's track 6A, which is south of 599, which is 19.5 something acres. That is the track that we've designated. It would be ideal for affordable housing project. So that would follow a similar track as to Alto Street, where we just did a request for qualifications, received the submittals, and the committee really decided on one, and we drafted a donation agreement, which was approved by the governing body. And so that track, that 6A, will follow the same or similar track. The other tract of land that the city will retain this time is also south of 599, just under 2 acres, and it's zoned commercial. And that we're going to retain just for future use. It's the terrain there, I don't believe is that good. And so we decided to retain that possibly for future use, and also due to the zoning being commercial. So the other 7 tracts of land are north of 599 of various sizes. And those tracts are the ones that are designated to be sold through here again, a request for qualifications, and really sell all of those. Whoever the successful purchaser of those properties will become the new declarant, replacing the city as the declarant. And the declarant has certain rights and certain obligations as far as the master plan and the development there. Also, I'll just go ahead and add that if the properties are sold, in that purchase agreement, what we can do is include provisions in the purchase agreement that the new declarant will take some of the needed actions to remove 6A, not remove 6A, but the required actions for redesignating part of 6A, removing them from, I believe it's some of the CCNRs, the conditions, covenants.
Yeah, I see the city attorney's office representative in the back. Maybe we could get more specificity there. Because I thought we were talking about 7, is it acres north of 599? So how did we get into talking about 6A? Confused.
Good evening, Chair, committee members. Andrea Salazar from Assistant City Attorney. So following up where Terry is at, I can actually plug in my computer so we can look at the map if you would.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's not any better on your computer than it is on mine.
No.
Which one are you looking at? You're looking at Exhibit A,
So,
map of existing tracks?
yes, this is the master plan set. So if you want to look at another map, I'm happy to bring that up. But in describing the different tracks, they're different in terms of legal description versus master plan description. It's a little easier to navigate the master plan so you understand what the buildable footprint is. So what Terry is talking about, this little location here is 6A south of the Veterans Memorial Highway. And the other location that we have extracted from the announcement of sale is this little section 10, which goes along with this open space to be dedicated. And allegedly back in 2015, the Summary Review Committee accepted dedication of this open space. So this is technically a contiguous open space area, even though it's designated 10. It's listed allowed uses are community uses like open space, fire, police. There's a couple other.
That's the one that's zoned commercial?
No, this is not zoned.
Oh,
commercial.
okay.
This is zoned community services. So the
Okay,
commercial zoning, I believe, is the senior residential area. This 11 here. And 9A and 5B. We currently own this 11 and this 7A and B section. So those were designated neighborhood. Skip to the. Sorry, they're village center. Those are. These sections are the village center. So they allow for some commercial, but they're also designated as senior residential. So the question about commercial property, I don't believe that there is any technical commercial property on this. The 6A is a tract of land for homes for residential use. And many of the other tracts that are on this 5A, 4B, 4A, 3A, and these contiguous parcels here, 2D and 1A are all residential homes. So the only piece of property that could be designated for anything other than homes is probably this senior residential facility, allowing some type of amenities maybe within the building.
okay. And so we've got 6A south of 599, 19.5 acres designated to be affordable housing. So can we go back to explaining the other piece, which is north of 599?
Yes.
It's 7 tracts or 7 acres?
7 tracts.
Okay.
So there are 7 tracts, and let me see if I can bring up.
And I guess where I got confused, so there'd be a new declarant, and then there was something about changing, having some impact on 6A. This is where I got confused.
Chair, committee member. So this master plan designates the area with entitlements. Included in the master plan, there's also covenants and restrictions for the residential area and the non-residential area. So this entire master plan set has HOA covenants and restrictions. Those restrictions were delineated for a declarant because there was one sole developer, which was Santa Fe Estates. When we took over that property, Santa Fe Estates transferred their declarant rights and status to the city of Santa Fe. Right now, those rights are held by an HOA, and we have a contract with an attorney that we're needing to renew. John Fox, he sits as our declarant when the board meets. What that means is declarant has specific duties, both fiduciary and rights to remove parcels of land. So while the city is the declarant, we have someone who is authorized to be that declarant for us. And the declarant is the only entity that's allowed to remove property for specific uses. The HOA can allow for affordable housing to have reduced fees. This is important because the HOA conditions and restrictions have 3 types of assessments. They have general assessments, special assessments, and there's one other assessment that I can't remember the exact term for, but they're like occasional assessments. It's important because those assessments range in value, meaning that every year the declarant or the HOA can assess different fees against the property owners in this area. And with affordable housing, the board has the right to remove affordable housing from getting all of those assessments or remove it from having to pay full price for design review. So HOA also has requirements for design review. So the reason why we're talking about either removing the parcel or restricting the assessments is so that the affordable housing provider has the choice of either participating in the assessments and the design review or asking to be removed out of it. So that's why we would either enter into a purchase agreement with the entity or the person who purchases the remaining 7 tracts to remove 6A or to restrict the fees and assessments against 6A if it is indeed all affordable housing. or reduced affordable housing. So we're asking for that negotiation room is really what we're talking about in this resolution.
Okay, I think I got it. Mr. Lees, did you want to go on? I don't think you got to the meat of the deal.
Well, Mr. Chair, Councilor Elmworth, I think we kind of covered it all. Did we miss?
Okay, so we just got to north of 599, there are 7 tracks, but you didn't tell me what we're going to do with those 7 tracks. Because I got confused about the declarant. So now I understand that.
Okay, so as it says in the resolution, the 7 tracts of land we want to offer for sale through a public competitive process. And this resolution lays out the terms for that, including a local preference, which there was a lot of discussion on the last resolution. So this, like I say, it will lay out the steps necessary to offer that for sale.
Okay, and how would you characterize these 7 tracks and why haven't they been built on already?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Raworth, I'm going to defer to Andrea. Know more about it.
Sure, Chair, Counselor. So the 7 tracts of land are the remaining parcels. So it's about 250 acres. I can't remember the exact amount. They are in this developable kind of envelope here. The reason potentially
Wait, show me that again. I'm sorry, I was writing something down.
So this, I'm kind of going along this area
Yeah, okay.
along here, except for this 2C is removed from that. And it's currently being built out right now. As well as some of these to be dedicated areas, the residential senior area and this recreational area. And there's one other plot of land that's a lot kind of along, I think it's in this 2B section. Now, the reason probably for slow development is this is very hilly land. So there's a lot of arroyos, there's a lot of runoffs, there's a lot of hard to build locations on this land. So it's taken a long time for Santa Fe Estates at the time to develop out. A lot of the northeastern portion of this section has been built out into townhomes and cul-de-sacs, and they kind of take a route that go around the arroyos. So I think that's partially it's complicated land to build on, which is why it's been slow in this area.
So potentially very expensive.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lees, can you walk me through how this, let's see. Local preference works? It's in, I think it's in the last, be it further resolved. Is that correct? You get a 6% local preference
Yeah. Mr. Chair,
if both criteria are met. Maybe you could just walk us through.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Raworth. So as we say, we'll issue a request for qualifications, and in that there will be a scoring grid, which will take into consideration many of these factors. The local preference allows, I think it's the city's local preference allows up to 6% in the award for a local preference, broken down 3% for each. So in other words, an offer will offer X number of dollars, and they will actually be in the scoring. There will be an additional up to 6% added to that offer price to determine, like I say, where they fall in the grid for the scoring.
So according to this resolution, if they hold a City of Santa Fe or Santa Fe County business license and have held said license for the preceding 3 years, they get 3%. Anything else you want to tell me about that?
I'm sorry?
Anything else you want to tell me about that?
Chairman Elbert, no.
Okay, and then the second one?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Worth, so the business certificate will be the same up to 3%.
And that's with the New Mexico Tax and Rev Department.
Correct.
How do you get one of those?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Worth, I'm not sure. I can't answer that question. I'm sorry. I'll be prepared. I'll be better prepared for the next voting body.
And a business license, how do you get one of those? With the city, I assume you probably don't know how you do it with the county. I mean, so getting one is probably not that big a deal, but then the question is you have to have held it for 3 years, correct?
Correct.
Well, actually, here's Director Brown. I bet he knows how you get one of these.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Worth, to answer your question. So the preference is twofold, as you said. So getting a business license, you get it here in the city. You have to have a business license. The rules say that you have to have held it for 3 years. And then the state resident license is through the Tax and Rev Board. So you have to go to the state land office, the state Tax and Rev Board to get a license. Most folks who get a license with the city, well, actually all folks who get licensed with the cities have to come to the state Tax and Rev to get a license number first. And that number actually is attached to their local business license too. So any of our prospective candidate developers, entities, et cetera, will have to have a business license with a 3-year period in order to qualify for this local preference eligibility.
So wait, you go to Tax and Rev and you get your resident business certificate first. And then you have to bring that over to the city to show that you have that in order to get our business license?
Yeah, in order to get a city business license, you actually have to have a state Tax and Rev license number so that the state is tracking you just as much as we are. The state does not share that license information. The actual recipient has to share that with us. Right now, we have not been able to do a sharing of numbers with the state.
Okay, and as I recall, when this resolution didn't pass the last time around, there was concern that you could just come down and, rent out an office space and get a business license and actually be a business that wasn't local. So is this what we're doing, saying that you have to have it for 3 years to protect against that?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Worth, I'm going to step back a little bit further. When we first sent this parcel out for potential public notice of sale, we actually did it on a nationwide basis. We were actually looking for different types of developers all over the country. And so you could have been in Albuquerque, or you could have been in Austin, or you could have been in Phoenix, and come and originally to respond to the public notice of sale. But it did change when we had a resolution pass that asked for this to be revised in a resolution for a local preference so that we could address some of the economic impacts for the city of Santa Fe. So originally, you could have been in Albuquerque with a business license. State of New Mexico you still have something from Tax and Rev that says that you have a resident license, but you wouldn't have had or could have had a license with the city of Santa Fe. There are Albuquerque developers who have licenses here and are doing business here, building homes in the city of Santa Fe.
So then this local preference could still be given to an Albuquerque developer. It's not, when we say local, what do we mean? Local as into Santa Fe, or local as into the state, or local as into the region?
That's a good question. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Worth, local as in the county license, you could have an Albuquerque address and still have a city business license. We do issue city business licenses for local businesses. The state Tax and Rev allows you to have a state address. That's where this resident piece comes into play. So you still need to be New Mexico-based business, but when you get a business license plus city business license, you could be registered in Albuquerque, but still have a license to do business in the city of Santa Fe. We do a lot of businesses with other organizations around the country, and they have a license, but they could be domiciled in another state.
So we could give a local preference to a business that's domiciled in another state.
We would not give a local preference to a business that doesn't have a state resident license. So you could be a Phoenix business, but you wouldn't have a New Mexico resident license because you're in another state.
So that's how we're protecting against giving a local preference
Yes,
to an out-of-state domiciled.
right. And keep in mind, Councilor Romeroworth, that this is just one factor in the evaluation of the evaluations of these candidates who will bid on this land.
And originally, we were trying to sell it all, right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romeroworth, that's correct. We were trying to sell all the parcels because we wanted to keep the master plan whole. But through various iterations of this opportunity to do public notice of sale, we did receive a resolution suggestion to address the affordable housing issue for the city of Santa Fe, and could be because of the district, et cetera. But it was an opportunity to address affordable housing in another area of the city beyond the places that we're actually doing work on affordable housing right now. So this is where this resolution addresses that, and a portion of that parcel 6A, which Ms. Salazar had mentioned, is ripe for looking at it from an affordable housing standpoint. So we'll do feasibility from those responses.
As I also recall, there was some risk that a local developer wouldn't be able to afford building in these hard to develop parcels. And yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romeroworth, that is absolutely correct. Local developers need the financial stability in order to create the subsidy to build infrastructure, because this is open land, but it's master planned. You're probably going to need $30 million to do that. So there may be local developers who might reach out to national partners, investment syndicates, other developers, in order to process this this development, because the subsidy is higher and the city is not subsidizing it.
So we could be giving a local preference to a local developer that will then turn around and, in order to actually develop, probably have to partner with an outside developer in order to get the property built.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romeroworth, that is a possibility, and I want to actually, I don't know if Ms. Salazar is still here. There could be, and I want her to clarify this, there is a possibility that a local developer could be awarded based upon their financial stability, et cetera, because they'd have to share where you're going to get your funding from. They could win the award for the development and then in turn, we'll call flip it, because they are the chosen developer for the land. But this is something that could be debated through council and committee process. But I just wanted to let you know that is a possibility that they do, if they are chosen the developer for the land, we'll see their partners in the process. But it could be something where a local developer could flip it to someone else or sell the land.
After getting the local preference.
After getting the selection as a candidate.
Okay, maybe Ms. Salazar can.
Chair, Councilor Romeroworth. So technically, anyone could purchase it with a local preference, utilizing those two things, and could sell it to anyone else or part.
Including a developer from out of state.
Yes. So we have contemplated some thoughts about reversionary clauses in purchase agreements. We've done a little bit of research. We haven't gone very far with that, but in terms of having some type of power to dictate who the local preference goes to, that's a little bit harder, because even if we were to put in a reversionary clause, what would the clause say? Would it say that if you sold it or sold any parcel to another entity outside of the state, that it would revert back to the city? Or would it state that if they subdivided it and subdivisioned parcels went to anyone outside of the state, each one of those would then be reverted, those could have consequential problems with property rights down the line. So that's why when we're looking at covenants or restrictions or reversionary clauses, that might not be the best way to handle the local preference. So there potentially could be some types of ways to deal with it in the contract. We don't know how far we would want to go with that or whether they would even work, but those are possibilities. So we do have a spectrum of things that could happen.
So also clarify for me, a local preference means we are giving up a certain, this 3%, potentially 6% of what?
So what that would mean in our, and I will let Terry explain it more, but what it means is that when someone submits a value, so we're evaluating the criteria that has been listed in the resolution, but when it comes to price, someone would put in a price, and if they had both sections of the local preference, that 6% would be added to their price margin. So they would have a inflated price margin compared to other individuals should they not get the local preference price. And so then we would compare who would be the awardee based on price and based on all of those other indicators. Right. You want to change?
Chair, Councilor Romero. So what Andrea said is just absolutely right. To give an example of that and to address your question, yes, a local preference could offer $4 million for that property. Their $4 million, they would add 6% if they qualified for both, meaning their value in the ranking would be $4,240,000. The second highest offer could offer 4.1 or $4.2 million. And still, in that case, in this scenario, it would go to the local preference. So you're right. It's possible in this scenario that the city might receive less than they would have otherwise without a local preference.
And how likely is a scenario where we receive less and then the property gets flipped and we've given away money that then basically benefits an out-of-state developer?
Yeah.
And therefore the local preference, which, I agree. I'd love to give a local preference. I understand the wanting to do that for our local businesses, completely support it. But I just want to make sure it's going to work, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero, I have, you want to address that?
Rich, can I, as a sponsor,
Miss-
I'd like to respond to that because
Sorry.
this is something that we discussed at length in regards to how do we ensure that we are protecting the city's interest with this property and maximizing the return. And the topic of preventing somebody from coming in and flipping the property, we felt like there was no mechanism to ultimately do that. And when you look at what can be gained by an outside developer or saved, so to speak, we're talking about 6% here. So if we're looking and to make numbers round, properties that sell for $1 million, the local breakdown, the local preference would take off $60,000 off that price tag. And so ultimately the out-of-state person would save $60,000. I'm not well versed in real estate costs and transaction fees, but you're going to see a lot of that be incurred during a flipping. So we felt like if it's going to be flipped, we're not leaving much meat on the bone, so to speak, for a flipper. I think the biggest challenge we tried to figure out was regarding local preference. How do we allow for as many local folks to come and bid on the property? Because it is, when we do put it up, it's going to be 7 parcels. It is going to have a higher price tag, and that could limit folks from purchasing the property. And we looked at breaking it up parcel by parcel. Because we have the individual that has to maintain the oversight of it, we couldn't determine how we were going to say, well, parcel 6A, you're going to take on the declarant role. So when you purchase this, you're now the declarant for all these other property. It was just way too complicated. So we figured what we're going to do is we're going to extract two pieces, one to keep as open space, one to dedicate for affordable housing. And then the other 7 parcels, we will dispose all as one. And that person that purchases that is going to become the new declarant. I think to get to the crux of your concern regarding flipping, when you get to these type of numbers, there's we're not taking off 50%, 60%. We're talking 6% here potentially. That's if they meet both criteria. Remember, there's 2 criteria. If you only meet one of them, then you only get the 3%. If you meet both, it's 6%. And so with that, I'd hate for us to get stuck on the 6% when we can get clarification, and maybe Rich or Terry, you can tell me if when we bring in realtors, what are the additional costs that come on? Is it 6%? I mean, what is the average cost in addition to fees that you pay?
Hold on, Councilor Menowith, you still have the floor before we get into.
Yeah,
questions.
and I appreciate, and I thank the sponsor for trying to help me understand how this is being sorted out here. And I also appreciate that there have been discussions at length, but I have not been included in those discussions. And all I remember is some of the concerns from the last round. And so I'm just trying to get up to speed. And maybe what I need to do is, get some time with you all so I can walk through and better understand how we've gotten to this place that we're in. And I'd be curious in Councilor Garcia's question, but I'm not quite ready to go there yet. So I don't know, Director Brown, you were going to try to answer my question. Maybe I'd be curious to hear how you put it together.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Menowith, I've been dealing with a lot of development this week, and I've been using the word known unknowns. It is a known unknown because
wait, say that slower.
known unknown.
Known unknown.
We know it's out there, but we don't know if it's going to happen, right?
Okay.
So the question is, and I think Councilor Garcia is correct. I believe, this is my assumption, I believe there's a low probability that a local developer candidate will flip the site. Mainly because in order for them to address the response to the public sale and basically go to the top of the list, they're going to need a syndicate of all kinds of financial development partners and a scenario and a design that allows them to be a viable candidate. So just to get to that place tells them that they already have all the financial wherewithal to proceed with this close.
On that point, do they have capacity? Do our local businesses have capacity, given the nature of this property and the costs that you say are the $30 million that somebody said earlier is required in order to even get to a place where you can build?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Menowith, I don't believe we have local developers right now that do that. But there's a lot of, well, again, I'm using a financial word, dry powder in the city. They can actually do a lot of connecting with local family offices, wealthy investors, and come up with the financial capital that they need to make the deal work. So I would not put it against any of our local developers who know this is out there. They're already, working on how they make a deal work with this. So there is a possibility that we could have it. Again, we could look at Albuquerque. Perfect example. There's probably someone in Albuquerque who could do this, and they develop all the time. So it is a possibility that it could happen, but it is a low probability, I believe, that they could flip this development because in order to get through the rings of fire, I guess, to be a chosen candidate, they need to be ready for the subsidy costs. They need to be ready for the payment costs. They need to be ready for the construction costs, all those fees and taxes that go with it. So I think that the local preference candidate
will not just be by themselves. They will be a group or syndicate of folks who are come together for this.
Okay, and hold on, just taking some notes on what you're telling me. So having a local preference doesn't preclude an out-of-state developer or a developer of larger scale from bidding on this property.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Rareworth, that's correct. We're hoping that out-of-state developers who have that sort of capital abundance that will come in and apply for this. And I'm sure there are other cities that may have this issue with local preference. So some developers already have addressed this before. So again, keep in mind that it could be that they come to the table with a price tag that is an offer we can't refuse. Even though the local developer might have something that just reaches the valuation that we've put on our RFP. So there's another known unknown, right? We may have developers who say, well, you have this number, but we're gonna bump it up 10% because you probably have some local developers, they're gonna get a 6% bump themselves.
Yep. And I guess the other question is, so we had originally thought we'd put the whole thing on the market, not divided up the way we have, some for affordable housing, some for the other 7 tracks. And while I also completely appreciate the fact that we need affordable housing, I don't know, is this the best place to be looking for affordable housing? What the other piece I worry about is what happens if nobody wants this hard to develop land? Are we, hurting ourselves by offering it this way?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Rareworth, again, a known unknown, because we are making the assumption that our affordable housing community does see this as an opportunity to build homes there. And
Sure,
carving
for
it out.
that parcel, because that parcel,
That's correct.
yeah, that's the good parcel
Yes.
of what's remaining, right?
Right.
What the hard to develop, the hilly, the arroyos, the runoffs parcel is sort of the,
Yes, and that's the reason why we're selling it as a full master plan. What we don't want is for developer to come in and say, I only want 3, 4, and 2. You can take the rest.
right.
Because
But
then
even
the
so,
cities-
even if we're not saying 3, 4, and 2, even if we're saying 7 altogether,
Yeah,
still not, it's hard to develop land.
it is, but it's based upon a master plan. So they have some guidelines to start with in the master plan.
And when you say that, what do you mean?
It's laid out where
Where they can build,
they can build.
where the buildable tracks are in the hilly
Exactly.
arroyo
Yeah.
arroyo laden.
They have to do their diligence, but it's in the master plan. What it shows where, the plat shows the topography and they can make their decisions based upon that. There could be developers that say, you know what, we love hillside living, so we'll build to that. But
Okay. And as long as Alex Ladd is in the back, I want to make her night worthwhile. Tell me about this 6A track as an affordable housing site. Is it something our affordable housing developers are going to be jumping at?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, before we even got this far, we had asked HomeWise and the Housing Trust and Habitat, what do you guys think? Are we crazy? And they all said, of course, no, we could make it work. So we do think we have local capacity. It's possible there's even enough of a buildable area up there for a tax credit project. But the strategy is to present it to the market and see what the market thinks it can do with it. And there may be, they may follow a HomeWise model where there's some below market yet not considered affordable under our state law or our local law, but then more deeply affordable for part of the portions. I'm really hoping that they create a partnership and that there's actually each builder's building to their own strength and their own business model, but that they can kind of carve it up that way. So we'll see. And I think to your point, if nobody wants it, then that tells us something, right?
Right, right. Well, and I mean, of course, we need affordable housing in the city. Having it on the north side of town is, I think, also of interest. It's an area that probably doesn't have a whole bunch of opportunities for affordable buildings. So that's a plus, correct?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, I think it is.
Yeah, yeah. And so what happens if we put this out there and nobody bites for either side? We then go back to packaging it in a different way and maybe the original way?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Worth, it's a very good question. If no one bites, it's still our land. So, I think the economist was here recently talking about macroeconomic conditions. We may wait a cycle. We may just wait a cycle. We've been waiting for a couple of years to make this happen. So we may just wait a cycle and then send it back out, just following the trends of the economy. But
Right. I was going to ask you that too. I mean, with the talk of recession, we might have missed the window when people were jumping at this sort of thing. Right now, things are tightening up and maybe nobody's willing to be, investing this kind of money for hard to develop land.
Yeah. That's correct. We've missed one window of the cycle. And so we're going to see where we are right now with this one.
And so we would go out fairly soon with this. If it passes, we wouldn't wait a cycle. We'd just go out and see where we are.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Worth, that's exactly correct. We would send out this public notice. There's going to be enough time there. It's not a 30-day turnaround. So it'll be quite a while. So we'll know. And in the process, we may elicit some feedback from our RFP webinar, just to figure out who's out there asking questions. We'll kind of know whether or not how big a response we're going to get. So it's a part of the RFP process. We can answer people's questions.
Okay. I think I do need to maybe schedule some time to make sure I'm understanding all this, and that, some of the things that brought up before that caused the first round not to go through, kind of how the lengthy discussions that Councilor Garcia mentions. I think I need probably some more understanding of, how those concerns were resolved. And I mean, I think tonight I have a thumbnail sketch, but I think I'd like a little bit more. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor, any other questions? Councilor Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to help provide clarification for Councilor Romero Worth, that the main challenge that was before us in the last resolution was regarding local preference. How can we ensure that we're bringing folks to the table that are local to ensure we're providing opportunity for that money to stay in the community? And the main crux of the debate was, how do we determine local? Because in the prior resolution, it just said local. We didn't have any parameters regarding how we were going to determine local. So with this new resolution, we've got two different criteria that clearly delineate local preference, what that means to get that 3% and 3%. Councilwoman Villarreal and myself figured, since we're going to be working on this, let's figure out how to increase the supply of affordable housing, given that we've seen success regarding the donation of city land in the past. And we figured, let's try it. Let's figure it out. We have this land. And we figured let's put this to the market. Let's have the market tested. And if it doesn't work, then we can't say we didn't try. So that's what we're doing with this is we're trying to how to figure out how to provide local preference. And we're trying to figure out how to provide affordable units in a part of town that usually doesn't have any affordable units. So happy to answer any questions offline that you may have. So with that, I don't know if a motion can be made now. A motion to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval in a second. Any further discussion? I do have one follow-up question. I'm not sure who this is for, but I believe like in other projects that the city does, there's a 10% local preference. So why wasn't that put forth here instead of 6%? Or why was
Mr. Chair?
6% chosen instead of 10?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask our legal representative, Ms. Salazar, to address that because I think the state number is 6%, but maybe she can address that question.
Well, you're walking up, Miss Salazar. The question was, I think in other projects, I think like if you're bidding to do I don't know, building a teen center, you get a 10% local preference. And here we're only offering 6, so just wondering.
Chair, we tied the 6% to the procurement preference. So we did some research about what the percentages of local preference could be. We did not find any jurisdictions that allowed for a larger percentage. So what we did was we tied it to the procurement because we knew that at least that realm was a safe realm. And so we matched that so that part of it is that resident business license and part of it is the city of Santa Fe. I don't actually know exactly what the teen center circumstances are, and I have a feeling maybe Wheeler does.
Chairman, actually, as City Attorney Salazar said, our procurement manual has the local preference set at 3%, so they would never get 10%. That was the old days.
The old days. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Miss Wheeler. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, thank you. And then just a follow up on Councilor Romero Worth's question. If somebody had a PO box here, like they set up a PO box business license here, would they be qualified as a local vendor? Which I think some people have done in the past.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. I think that you might have a PO box here, but you would need to have the compliance diligence done to see if you're an actual business here. So you may have a PO box, but you do have to have some physical presence here with that PO box. And we have a lot of out-of-state companies that, you know, they have little satellites, but there's no capacity or human resources here. So that would be a question that we'd have to sort of dig into, but I don't recall that you can get your license and say you're a Santa Fe based business, just a PO box. You actually have to have an inspection and go through compliance, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Okay. Thank you.
so there's an update from legal.
Chair, I actually believe that someone who's doing business here has to get a business license. So we have like law firms that are housed in Philadelphia, but have to obtain a Santa Fe business license in order to contract with us. So that type of entity could get a city business license. So there, I mean, we might have to do some due diligence to see how long they had the business license, whether they're actually local. Maybe that's some more definition into our local preference parameters. I hadn't really thought about that until you brought it up.
Who would do that work to actually verify that they're really a local business?
Mr. Chair, that would come through the evaluation team. You know, they would vet those folks, especially if this candidate's made it, the evaluation, the rank number one, there'd be a lot of vetting that would come before we'd even get to committee because of the importance of this local preference.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Let's take a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz.
Counselor Amanda Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth, and Chairman Rivera.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We're on to item F. Can you read that into the record, please, Ms. Diaz?
A resolution relating to firearms, recognizing that certain city properties are used for school-related activities, which makes the carrying of a deadly weapon on such properties a fourth-degree felony pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 30-7-2.1, and directing the city manager to work with staff to post notice on such facilities. This item is Kira's.
Thank you, Counselor Lee Garcia. You pull this?
Thank you, Chair. I just, I pulled it primarily because I voted no against this at the last meeting. And so without pulling it, I cannot do that again through consent. I did have a question in regards to the fiscal impact because I was going through there. It says it's a $400 fiscal impact. And how did we derive to that number?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Rivera, I believe the fiscal impact report looks at the cost of the actual signs. And so it's based on an estimate or a pull on what that would cost. The signs themselves.
And that would cover signs at all facilities that were mentioned in the resolution.
That is my understanding.
In regards to the signs, would they state or on the sign, would it allude to the state statute that we're utilizing, put the signs and reference that when people see the signs?
I'll defer to the city manager on that.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, thank you for the question. We have not begun work on the signs themselves yet. We're waiting to see if this actually passes through the governing body. But my sense would be it would comply with similar signs placed around the state. And I think it would likely include some reference to the statute itself.
Thank you. So have you looked at signs that have been posted around the state in regards to this?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, I myself have not. I don't know if the staff who've been working on the bill, on the resolution rather, have done that, but we're happy to ask.
Okay, who is the staff working on this? I know that it's sponsored by quite a few people, so.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia, I've worked on it. I think the city attorney has worked on it. I think Director Ochoa has worked on it a little bit. And I believe the sponsors have done most of the heavy lifting, but I think the city attorney and former staffer Jesse Guillen as well have done a significant amount of work on it.
Thank you. I appreciate you stating that for the record. Again, just my personal feelings on this, and also through discussion at our previous committee meetings, I think there's a lot of work to be done on this. If it is something that we do pass as I think it's going to pass. I mean, it's already being supported by 5 governing body members. And so I just once again pulled it to ask a few questions in regards to signage, how it's going to be done. I think some of the other questions we had were, will signs be put up and taken down? Answers haven't been given to that. I believe it was stated in our previous committee meeting. And I believe it's the opinion of our city attorney that we're in the complete legal authority to do this now. And I would sensibly think that that is not consistent with what our state constitution allows. And I would hope that this is not going to bring forth any type of litigation by any groups, which would directly affect our city and our constituent base. So that's all I have to say for tonight. I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Counselor, any other questions? Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Director Ochoa and City Manager Blair for being here, because I think you can help clarify some confusion that's maybe out there in the community, just because I've heard from a lot of constituents and correct me if I'm wrong, we are not passing any new laws with this resolution. Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, Counselor Garcia, that is correct. We are not passing any new laws.
Okay, and that's one thing I've heard from constituents. Pass this law. You need to pass this ordinance, we're not passing a law. This is current law that prohibits deadly weapons in spaces where school-related and sanctioned activities are being performed. And so, for example, should a field trip be in attendance with us during this meeting, deadly weapons would be prohibited in the council chambers. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, again, we're not creating a new law, and so those activities are already prohibited. What we're doing is passing a resolution that would allow us to put signs up to give notice to the public that the deadly weapons are not allowed in the property.
Okay, and so I think the answer to that is yes, they would be prohibited, or am I correct? Am I incorrect?
Mr. Chair, Counselor Garcia, you are correct.
Okay, and so with Mr. Blair's comments, there's nothing prohibiting you from putting a sign up today. We don't need to pass this resolution to have you install a sign stating that there is a current law that, go ahead, Director Ochoa.
Mr. Chair, Counselor Garcia, I believe you are correct. I would ask that we affirm that with the city attorney. The resolution is not an ordinance, as you've mentioned. It's a resolution underscoring that our public buildings are also covered by the existing 78 statute.
Right.
So it provides additional information to the public to underscore that these buildings too are covered under that 78 statute.
Correct, in the sense, when public school and sanctioned activities are being performed, that we fall into that category, and that means any building throughout the entire state, not just city, county. It means any public buildings or grounds that are, when public school related sanctioned activities are being performed, deadly weapons are prohibited. Right.
Mr. Chair, Counselor Garcia, that is correct.
Okay. And so thank you for the clarification on that. And I guess I would be very interested in regards to what, I think there's only one other municipality that's acted upon this, which is the city of Albuquerque through executive order by Mayor Keller. So I'd be interested in seeing an example of the signage being utilized by the city of Albuquerque. It just as an example, not to say we're going to replicate what they're putting up, but just to learn like what they're displaying in their city facilities. So if we can have that, I know it's not possible tonight, but given that it's already passed one committee, we'll be going to the governing body. And if we could have that prepared for the governing body meeting, that would be fantastic.
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, we're happy to reach out and ask about that. As I understand it, I think this will be on the governing body agenda on January 25th. And I will flag, I'm not aware that Albuquerque is the only municipality. That was the only one that I am aware of as of when we spoke last week.
Okay. And
We're
so with
happy to track
that,
that down, absolutely.
sure, if there's any other in this state, just given this is a state statute we're working off of, if there are any other municipalities or county entities, happy to learn who else is kind of enacting such. With that, thank you for the questions. I really appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve with a second. Further discussion? I do have a question. Is this related just to concealed carry or open carry as well, or is it both?
Mr. Chair, it is both. It does not make a distinction.
So this is a current law that we're just gonna put signage up about. Yet recently, I think within my tenure as a counselor, we had individual open carry into this chambers and address us from where you're standing with a firearm on his side. And we were told at that time by a city attorney that that's his constitutional right. So what's different about this?
Mr. Chair, my understanding is that the interpretation is allowing public buildings where school-sponsored activities take place to be understood by the public to be part of the state statute. And so if this interpretation had been brought at that time, I think that could have been possible at that time. I think it's sort of bringing to light that this is a way to ensure that in buildings where school-sponsored activities take place, firearms are not allowed.
And I assume the city attorney's office is under the realization that we're probably going to get sued for this. Is that correct? Challenged on this?
Mr. Chairman, I think based on the comments that the city attorney made at the quality of life meeting last week, and I don't want to speak for her, I'll speak for myself. We feel as if we are on very credible legal standing. We can't prevent people from filing frivolous lawsuits to make a point. And so no one can guarantee, but we are quite confident in our legal standing and doing what we're doing.
Not so much a legal standing, but how much in public dollars do we anticipate spending to take this as far as we need to go?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe the city attorney's office has quantified any potential amount of dollars that would be needed to litigate this.
Okay. All right, thank you, Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this was brought up during the Quality of Life Committee meeting regarding individuals with firearms here in the chambers. I can't speak for the opinion of the prior city attorney, but going off of the current law, it clearly states that when the facility is being utilized by public school-related and sanctioned activities. Now, in the example I gave earlier, if there was school-related and sanctioned activity taking place in City Hall during a council meeting and somebody comes with a firearm or a deadly weapon, that would violate the state statute. Again, reading the law, if there is no public school related or sanctioned activities being performed in City Hall at the time of a city council meeting, this law does not apply. It only applies when public school related and sanctioned activities are being performed. And so I think that's where maybe some misunderstanding of the public is, because the law would only apply when the activities are being performed. And so I think you brought up an issue of litigation against the city because of enacting this. I also look at it from a different perspective of litigation against the city where somebody is given a 4th degree felony charge and they were in a facility. Let's continue with the City Hall example. And there are no school sanctioned activities taking place, so there's no law to be broken. Was that person falsely charged, thus warranting litigation on the officer that falsely charged him? And so I think this is where we need to get further clarification on this, because it really underscores our rights, because right now it's seems like we do have the right to prohibit deadly weapons when sanctioned activities are being performed. But what happens when they're not? And so, for example, softball fields, because this takes into consideration fields of play. Let's see. I apologize, I had it pulled up, but from my recollection, there are certain MRC, I think, or the library. What happens when those facilities aren't being utilized as school sanctioned activities? And I think that's where, I think Councilor Garcia brought it up in the past meeting as well. Do the signs come up and come down? And I'm interested in the signage that's utilized by other entities, because if we do move forward with this, I would strongly encourage that we incorporate language that says something such as deadly weapons are prohibited in this building while public school related and school sanctioned activities are being performed, and then cite the statute. That way it's clear that if this is going on, you're violating the law if you bring a deadly weapon in here. And deadly weapons beyond a firearm. I mean, a deadly weapon could be a knife. So I think that's where, again, we want to make sure we are doing everything we can to alert the community, not only of what's prohibited, but alert them of, hey, if you bring this in here, you're going to get in trouble. You bring in your pocket knife, you can get a 4th-degree felony charge against you. And we want to make sure that we're clearly educating the community on what is currently law in place and how a person can be an offender of the law. So hopefully that helped to clarify maybe the past. That's probably why, because there wasn't school kids in the chambers at that time during the school sanctioned event. But yeah, thank you for allowing me to comment, Mr. Chair.
Councilor,
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Romero Worth.
if we could get the city manager or Director Ochoa to help us understand what we are trying to do with this resolution, because I don't think the way it was just described is accurate.
Chairman, Councilor Maraworth, Councilor Garcia, if I can speak to all this briefly. I'm not as eloquent as the city attorney, and so I'll defer to her and we'll have her teed up on the 25th. But when we were at the quality of life meeting, she discussed the interpretation of the word being held. Doesn't necessarily mean we would put the sign up from 8 to 9 because there's an event happening and then take it down at 9 and put it back up at 11 because there's an event going on. The definition is in the statute, I believe, is broader than that. And so we will make sure that the city attorney does bring a better explanation than what I can do right now for you when it's at the governing body meeting. Beyond that, the goal of this is to provide certainty for the community so they understand the rules of the road, for lack of a better term, of what's happening. The goal is to provide notice to lawful gun owners and those people who wish to do harm that these weapons are not allowed in these facilities. The signage isn't intended to confuse. It's not intended to do anything other than to make sure that the public knows that if they pull up in their car with a weapon in the car, they should leave it in the car. It's not welcome in the building. And so the goal of this is to provide clarity for the community, or the certainty for the community. And as I discussed at the quality of life meeting as well, this is one of what will hopefully be a number of things that this governing body, that the Congress, that the state legislature do to try to bring an end to the epidemic of gun violence in this country. I'll flag, today is Monday. Yesterday, I believe, was the 12th anniversary of when Gabby Giffords was shot and 6 people were killed in Arizona. We're all very aware of the 6-year-old who shot their teacher on the East Coast last week. I'll again say that we know that gun violence is the 3rd leading cause of death of children in New Mexico. It is now the #1 cause of death for children in the country. And so this is one step that we are taking, and we think it's a very fair step that provides clarity and certainty for the community and helps us try to keep our children safe.
Yeah, thank you. And I just think I don't want to leave the idea with the public that what we're sponsoring here is something that's going to be a huge administrative job of putting up signs, taking them down, having to check buildings to see whether they're public school kids or some activity going on. The idea is if the building is used for sanctioned school activities or the playing field or whatever, then the sign will be there as long as that facility or field continues to be used in that manner. So as one of the co-sponsors, this is not the idea that we're going to be taking down signs and creating this huge administrative burden to put them up and take them down. So I look forward to hearing more from our city attorney, because that's my understanding of what we're trying to do here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Chavez.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding too, and City Manager, you could clarify if I'm correct, the signs wouldn't need to go up and down because of the fact that it's just identifying the fact that that building is used by a school sanctioned event at some point. So it's not going to say what hours, it's just going to say we've identified this building as being utilized by public schools. And for that reason, the statute, be aware of the state statute, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Chavez, pardon me. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So really, it's just the communication of identification that we have school sanctioned events present in our buildings, which is informative. And I know, I use the word at quality of life in a way of being transparent to the community as to our partnership with school districts within our area, and the fact that we're taking initiative to keep our students safe, but also being very clear in our communication so that the public's aware of that as well. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I had some more discussion on this, and while I appreciate the reasoning behind this, because obviously we need to take steps to keep our community safe. Again, this resolution, while not a law, while its intent is to try to keep people safe, I disagree that is what is really going to happen. And the reasoning for that is how many schools visit city buildings? How many schools go on field trips to the Wildlife Center? How many schools? We already know this. And again, what we are trying to do here is to say, here's a sign, guns are not allowed here. And I believe that in itself, even though we're utilizing the state statute to justify this, I think that it opens us up to scrutiny from other organizations that at some point will contest this. And I think that's where it really does feel like just something that, again, I've already voted no against this, and we'll go on to the next meeting, but I don't believe we've had any outside recommendations. I believe Councilor Garcia mentioned this regards to the Attorney General's position. Have we sought that out?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Garcia, as the city attorney said last week at Quality of Life meeting, there wasn't a need to seek out an attorney general opinion on this matter because we're complying with the law.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I think of the Chavez Center when I think about this, and they have swim meets there. I think that involve high schools, even grade schools. I think would these signs then be up year round because there are times when school events are happening there?
Mr. Chair, yes,
So they would be up year round.
correct. In addition to the swim meets, we also have the after-school programs, the summer programs.
Right.
But I guess the primary purpose is when buildings host school-sponsored events, those are buildings which prohibit lethal weapons. So that means anytime that a building does that, there will be a sign on that building and that will be prohibited.
And are we doing anything besides a sign to enforce these rules?
Mr. Chairman, our police department isn't currently enforcing the laws now. If someone were to show up to the GCCC today and say, I see a person standing with a gun in the lobby, call 911, the police will show up and enforce the existing law. The difference now is that this resolution would allow us to have the signage up to notify law-abiding citizens in advance that they should not bring these weapons into the building.
All right, but we're not gonna do anything proactively to enforce this, like some kind of system to notify staff if somebody's walking in with a concealed weapon.
Mr. Chair, I think that's something to explore in the future in terms of staff training, what to do so that they're also aware of what this means. And I think this is a good opportunity for that.
We're not looking at metal detectors or anything else to try to enforce the signage that we're putting up.
Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, I'm not aware of any interest from the sponsors of the legislation to pursue that sort of a step.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add as well, I think you all on the council are aware that we initiated this year our first ever active shooter training for city staff. That will be the first of what will likely be many trainings around how to handle an active shooter situation, how to make sure that particularly for our frontline employees who are there, how to handle someone who comes in with a deadly weapon or a gun, how to help save lives of others, how to save their own lives. And that will be some ongoing training that we continue to do.
Well, we shouldn't have that situation if we have signs up, right?
Mr. Chairman, I think no matter what signs or laws we pass, we have people who break the law.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Diaz.
Counselor Amanda Chavez. Counselor Lee Garcia.
No.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
And I'd like to explain my vote.
Okay. Now or at the end?
It'll be at the end.
Okay. Counselor Romero Worth. And Chairman Rivera.
I'm gonna abstain as well. Counselor Michael Garcia, you want to explain your vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think I need more information because my interpretation of the law as it stands, when it says being performed, that's an act of someone performing something. And the way it's being currently interpreted by our city attorney, it's an open-ended. If something takes place once, it's open-ended forever. And I think I need further clarification on that and the signs, et cetera. I will have another opportunity to debate this topic at governing body that given that it's passed one committee. So I look forward to further information and clarification from the city attorney's office.
Thank you, Counselor. I think motion fails because of a lack of a majority. 2 abstentions, 1 no, 2 yeses. Madam Parliamentarian.
Well, this is where it gets tricky because abstentions are actually yes votes. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you there.
Are abstentions yes votes or no votes?
Under our rules, abstentions are yes votes when you have to count them like this, but we should seek clarity with the city attorney's office. So I don't think we can say what happened here.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can make that call. I can just tell you how I think the rule plays out.
It seemed, if I could just chime in, it would seem to me an abstention is neutral. So 2 yes votes against 1 no vote.
I know that's the
Common sense tells me, but
that's the
it would
funny
have
thing.
to be in our in interpretation of the rules.
still not a majority, so it doesn't pass, it doesn't fail, so. It already passed one committee, so it's gonna move forward to the governing body, so. But I don't think we can say that it passed this committee. Councilor Chavez?
Just wondering, based on what Counselor Garcia said, if the two are neutral, then out of the three active votes, wouldn't it be a majority? The
2-1,
yes,
yeah.
Yeah, 2-1. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think we need to probably check with city attorney, city clerk as to what the action taken here resulted in.
I think it'll still move forward anyway, so we'll have the.
Yeah, it has already passed quality of life, so it is going to governing body.
Mr. Chairman, we will reach out to the city attorney's office to get a ruling on that question.
Thank you, appreciate that. I'm not sure how Ms. Diaz would put it on the.
Yeah, I think we need to we don't have the expertise in the room to make we'll just have to ask them, this is how the vote went down. What does it mean?
If you can check with the city attorney's office or check with the city manager when he gets the answer from Ms. McSherry, that'd be great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Action items, discussion. We have nothing, executive session, nothing matters from staff. Ms. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I thought I would make you aware, there has been a mid-year budget adjustment bar that the governing body has been reviewing in committees, and there is another one coming for the Parks and Open Space division that will have additional resources to support homelessness management, as well as the golf course and all of our parks actually overall. And so we're working with finance to put that together and hope that you will see it on the finance committee meeting next Monday. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones, anything?
Nothing for public utilities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Matters from the committee? Councilor Michael Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's come to all of our attention that there are some rebranding efforts underway for the municipal golf course, the Marty Sanchez Golf Course. And I think there's also maybe potentially some confusion out there in the community. And so to help maybe alleviate some concerns and confusion, Director Wheeler, I don't know if it might be possible to have a presentation be given to us on the plan for any potential rebranding efforts for Marty Sanchez. Just that way, the community's aware. It was the first I was aware of it, and I think it would help us all move forward in a direction towards, should we begin to rebranding, it's a process that we can fully understand and fully stand behind after being educated on what's taking place. So I don't know if that's possible to get a presentation on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Councilor Garcia. Actually, there is no effort to rebrand the golf course. And but the reason the whole question came up is because the golf course manager is going to give us a presentation at the next Public Works and Utilities Committee meeting about his assessment of the golf course in his new time here and some action plans for moving forward. And something about his presentation triggered people to think it had been rebranded, but can definitely get that confirmation from him. And I believe he's scheduled to be here at our next meeting as well.
Okay, thank you for that. But I've heard different from staff where they said there's plans to rebrand the website and logo. So if we can just get an update during the meeting regarding what Mr. Weiss's plans are regarding websites and logos and names, et cetera, that I think it would be helpful to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councilor Garcia, you said from staff, because staff is Melissa McDonald, Director, and Jonathan Weiss and I, and we were responding to constituent complaints last weekend that they perceived that there was rebranding, but there isn't rebranding. So it kind of would surprise me that staff said that there was rebranding.
And I can read you the email from Director McDonald. John is looking at upgrades to the website and the logo, but not the name. And
Okay,
so
great.
that's what I received. And so I think, like I said, just to alleviate any concerns and help educate the community in regards to future processes that will be taking place. Let's get the elephant out of the room and address it, I think. And it
Thank you so
helps us
much.
to understand when these issues come to us, we are well aware and we can inform constituents, yes, this is what's taking place. No, that's not taking place, and we can help to stop the misspreading of misinformation out there. So thank you for any help you can provide.
Thank you. That he'll be here next at our next meeting with a presentation and to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Wheeler. Anything else from committee? All right, matters from the chair. I have nothing. Our next meeting is Monday, January 23rd. With that, unless anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you.